This video is for the purpose of showing you how to replace the antenna on the G2 or G3 Sennheiser EW100 system body packs. On these Sennheiser wireless systems, the antenna is soldered in place, so in order to replace a broken antenna, it's necessary to disassemble the unit. First thing you want to do is you want to remove the clip on the back of the body pack, and then remove the 4 screws that hold the back plate on. These 4 screws are Torx type or Torx type screws, which is a 6-sided star configuration. The size is a Torx 6, which is available at most hardware stores. The only tools you really need are the Torx size 6 screwdriver, a soldering gun, and some solder. And then the next thing you need to do is remove the pin that holds the door in place. Now, if you just take that same Torx number 6 and push it on one side, you can push the pin out far enough to get a hold of it on the other side. And once you have it off, the door will come completely off of the unit. So you can pull that off the unit and just set it aside for now. You want to remove the batteries if you have batteries inside. Be careful about the 2 little tabs that are on either side of the body pack unit. Those tabs will fall out of place if you're not careful. There's also the buttons on the front panel and under the door that will also fall out. So when you take it apart at this point, you want to hold it upside down. That way everything stays in place as you pull it apart. Pull the back plate off and just set that aside for now. You're going to want to pull those 2 tabs out, set those down. Now take a look at where the antenna solders onto the board. There's a screw there, and there's also 2 other screws. There's a total of 3 screws on that circuit board. You only need to remove 1 of those screws. You can remove the whole circuit board if you like, but it's not necessary. You'd have to remove that ribbon cable, which is kind of delicate. I think the best procedure is just to remove 1 of the screws, and this is the way it was recommended to me by the technicians at Sennheiser. Once you've removed that screw actually holds the circuit board to the bottom and also secures the whole thing together. So once you remove that, you can pull the front part of the body pack away. Here you can see the little tabs or the little inserts that serve as buttons for the functions. There's a double pad and there's 2 singles right and left. Now I just flipped it over here so they dump out so you can see how it actually works. Those buttons inset into the metal front panel, and they're easily replaced as long as you know where they go and how they go in. The black part of it faces out. The black part is the part you actually see when you put it back together. So the white part of it, make sure that's on the back side of it when you put it back together again. So the best procedure is just to keep those in place and then just set it aside while you're working on the other part of it. The antenna is soldered to the circuit board in one place only. The connection is a small piece of metal in an L shape, and it solders at one point through the back of the circuit board. It's a little difficult to see from this video exactly how that goes in place. Once you get it apart, you'll see exactly the solder point. All you have to do at this point is heat up that one point on the circuit board that the antenna is connected to. Hold on to the antenna, and as soon as the solder heats up, just pull it away from the board. Now here you can get a better view of the antenna and the shape of the contact that solders to the circuit board. Here's a new antenna, which is Sennheiser's. You can order directly from Sennheiser. Make sure you order the correct range. That makes a difference on the antenna. I had a B range, and my part number was 91082. But Sennheiser can tell you exactly the antenna that you need, and they will send you the antennas, and they're very inexpensive. Now, before you install the new antenna, you want to make sure that you put a little bit of solder on the contact. This is true when soldering anything. You always want solder on your wire before you solder it to the contact point, or in this case, on the antenna. And now it's a little bit tricky because you've got to work from behind the circuit board and push the contact of the antenna, which is a piece of metal in an L shape, up through the circuit board and secure it in place by heating up the existing solder point. Make sure you're using a good soldering gun that you can control the heat on, because you don't need a lot of heat for delicate type of electronics. You don't want to use a big soldering gun that might fry your circuit board. Use a good quality soldering iron for electronics. Just heat up the solder point on the circuit board and then push the antenna contact pin up through the circuit board from the bottom. You'll feel when it's in place, and once it's in place, just hold it there for a second and it's done. The antenna is flexible and the contact will bend a little bit, so you can work it into position when you realign the unit and close it back up. Now your new antenna is installed, and all that remains is you reassemble the body pack. Make sure again that your tabs for your buttons are in place before you put the front panel back on. Again, work upside down so the tabs don't fall out. It's a good idea at this point to take a little Q-tip and clean up the surface of the glass on the front of the display. Just in case you have any dust on there, you won't be able to do that once it's assembled. Then you need to work the circuit board back into place on the front panel. Just take your time on it. Make sure that you get it aligned properly. The antenna has a rubberized base around it, and that base fits into a slot, and you have to take your time and make sure it's in there correctly. Once you've got the front panel in place, replace the screw that holds the circuit board onto the front panel. Check that the buttons all are in position and make sure that they're all lined up properly and working. It's a good idea to check the other screws to make sure everything's tight before you put everything back together again. You don't have to apply a lot of pressure to the screws, but you want to make sure they're snug and screwed all the way down. Make sure that the two side tabs are in the correct position. There's really only one way they can go because they're two different sizes. The larger one goes on the right side as it's facing up. The tabs simply fit into place. Take your time positioning the side tabs and the back panel, and then push everything together and make sure it's snug and tight. Once you know you've got everything snug down and the side tabs are in the correct position, then you can screw in the 4 screws that secure the back panel. Make sure the screws are snug, and then position the front door back into place. Install the hinge rod back into place by simply pushing it through one side. Make sure you push it through to where it's flush on both sides. Check the door and make sure it opens and closes correctly. Then you can replace the batteries and check to make sure the unit powers up okay. At this point, it's probably a good idea to go through the functions and make sure all the buttons work correctly on it, and then hook up the transmitter or the receiver unit, depending on what you're working on, and make sure that everything's working correctly. Replace the clip on the back, and the job's done.